They say family is supposed to be the safest place on earth, but for me, it was the place where my nightmare began. I was just 14 when I became pregnant, with my own brother's child in that same bedroom, where I used to hang up drawings and cradle dolls. And when my belly began to swell, my father didn't ask questions. He didn't offer protection. Instead, he spat words like slut and liar at me as if I'd made it all up. Even now at 73 years old, I can still hear his voice. I can still feel the weight of that shame. The bruises may have faded, but the memory never left. I've carried this story for nearly 6 decades, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Today, I finally speak not to seek pity, but to send a message to those who are living what I lived, or something like it. Please speak up. Get help. You are not weak. You are not alone. And if you've made it this far into my story, do me a favor, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story can reach. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel so we can keep shining light on the stories too many try to bury. My name is Rosa, and I survived, but I'm telling my story. I remember it with haunting clarity, the moment I first sensed that something in my family wasn't just broken, but deeply, dangerously wrong. I must have been around 7, lost in a game of make-believe, out in our modest backyard in Ohio, pretending I was a mother with dolls for children. That was when I heard my father's voice, rising in fury through the screen door from the kitchen. His shouting was nothing new. It was practically the soundtrack of our home, but that day hit different. Martha, quit babying that girl. She needs to learn who runs this house. It's me and Chuck. That's who. Chuck, my older brother, 5 years ahead of me in age, but always towering above like he had a head start on everything. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a mop of dark hair, and those unsettling green eyes no one else in the family shared. The neighborhood ladies would smile a little too long when he passed, whispering about how handsome he was, how the girls would line up someday. But none of them knew the first heart he'd crush would be mine. My father, Henry Rafflow, was a man out of step with the times, as folks might politely say. He held fast to the belief that women were meant to serve, that real men didn't cry, and that one boy was worth more than a dozen girls. He worked long hours at the local nuclear facility, not that I ever knew what he did there, but every evening he stumbled through the door, reeking of whiskey and Marlboros. On his good days, he treated me like furniture. On his bad days, well, disappearing was the safest bet. And my mother, Martha Rafflow, was grace-wrapped in exhaustion. Petite, always with her graying hair knotted in a neat bun, fingers rough from years of scrubbing other people's clothes to earn a few extra dollars. She tried her best, bless her heart. She tried to shield me when the storm came thundering down, but there's only so much shelter a woman can give when she's barely standing. "Stay quiet, baby," she'd whisper when the yelling started clutching my hand. "It'll pass." It never really did. We lived in a cramped 3-room house just outside Dayton. The living room doubled as everything. My parents had their own bedroom, and then there was the little room in the back Chuck and I shared. When I was little, things were good between us. He'd teach me to climb the old oak in the yard, bait a hook down by the creek, even how to whistle like the wind. But time has a way of changing things, and the shift came so quietly, I didn't even notice it at first. A hand resting too long on my back, a look that made my skin crawl. I was just a kid, naive, innocent. I thought that maybe all big brothers wanted to hug their sisters a little too tightly or crawl into bed beside them at night. After all, his bed was right there, only a few feet away. Sometimes my mom would walk in and find him curled up next to me. "Chuck, go back to your own bed," she'd say, her voice soft but tired. He always had some excuse. He was scared of the thunder. He was cold. He missed when we were little, my father. He thought it was charming. Ain't they close, he'd boast to anyone who'd listen. That's what a real family looks like. Then he'd ruffle Chuck's hair and beam with pride. After all, Chuck was everything he wanted in a son. He hit home runs, cursed like a sailor, guzzled beer like it was soda. They were inseparable, like twin flames of the same bad fire. Me, I was the glitch, the accident, the girl they didn't want, the reminder that life doesn't always give you what you ask for. She's the result of poor planning, he'd tell his poker buddies, jerking a thumb toward me like I wasn't even there. But what can you do? God's got a sense of humor. I was about 9 the day I realized something truly dark was blooming in Chuck. It was Easter Sunday. My mom had stitched me a cheerful yellow dress, and for once I felt like I belonged. The house was buzzing with relatives, uncles, aunts, second cousins. The whole clan gathered for ham and barbecue. Everyone kept saying how grown up I looked, how I was turning into a lovely young lady. Innocent remarks, really, just family small talk. But Chuck's eyes turned hard. I caught the way he clenched his soda so tight, the plastic cup nearly collapsed in his grip. Later, when folks were outside by the grill laughing and catching up, he pulled me aside behind the garage. "Think you're special now," he hissed. Trying to get all that attention, I blinked, lost in confusion. Attention from who? I hadn't even said much, just quietly eaten my slice of chocolate cake like always. He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a threat. "You're mine, you got that mine. I better not catch you smiling at anyone else. Mine." The word sent a chill down my spine. Brothers don't claim sisters. Not like that. But in that moment right there on the cracked concrete behind the garage, something in me snapped. And though I didn't have the words for it, then I knew. I knew everything had changed. The way Chuck looked at me changed, shifted into something twisted, territorial, and terrifying. Even though I couldn't quite name it back then, I felt it in my bones, a cold dread, crawling up my spine, curling in my stomach, like spoiled milk. I turned to the only person I thought might help. "Mom, Chuck's acting weird with me," I said softly, while she stood over the kitchen sink, her hands buried in soap suds, her face worn from years of quiet endurance. She paused just briefly, and in that heartbeat of silence, I saw it. She knew. She absolutely knew. But what gutted me was the fear flickering in her eyes, the same fear already living in mine. "It's just your imagination, sweetheart. Your brother loves you," she said, her voice strained. "He's just being protective, that's all." Then she went back to scrubbing the dishes harder than before, like maybe she could wash away the truth clinging to the air between us. That was the moment it sank in cold and sharp. I was completely on my own. My father stood proudly by Chuck's side. And my mother, she was too paralyzed by fear to stand anywhere at all. That left me, just a little girl of 9, facing the monster who shared my roof, my room, my blood. Things didn't just stay bad, they escalated. He started showing up in the bathroom while I showered. Forgot my towel, he'd say, standing there like it was nothing. But he never turned around, never left. I'd shrink into the farthest corner, my hands fumbling to hide myself, but he just watched. "What's the big deal? I'm your brother." He'd mutter like that, made it okay. I started showering fully dressed, no joke. I'd lock myself in, only peeling off my clothes once I was safely behind the curtain. But he found ways around even that. He'd pound on the door until it gave way, saying he had to pee. My mother would scold the broken latch. My father would mutter that it was my fault for being careless. Nights were worse, always worse. He'd wait until the house was dead quiet, then slip into our room and perch at the edge of my bed, his fingers weaving slowly through my hair. "You know you're the prettiest in the family, right?" he'd whisper. I'd play dead eyes shut so tight they burned, praying with everything in me that he'd leave. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. When I turned 11, it all shattered. My birthday should have been nothing, just a quiet moment in an ordinary life. My mom made a cornbread cake with strawberry jam on top. No friends came, no party, just the four of us around the table singing that tired old tune. My dad handed me an old chip doll. "Ain't you getting too big for this crap?" he said with a shrug. But whatever. Chuck, though, made a show of it. He gave me a plastic necklace, cheap and gaudy, like something from a gas station rack, but held it like it was pearls. For my beautiful little sister, he announced, pulling me in for a hug that wouldn't end. Too long, too tight. And then I felt it, his hand sliding down my back, stopping where it had no business being. I looked at my mother pleading. She looked away. That night, everything changed. He came into our room again, but this time he didn't just hover. He leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. "You're a young lady now," he murmured. "Time you learned a few things." I was shaking so violently, the bed creaked beneath me. I tried to scream, but he clamped his hand over my mouth. "Shut up," he hissed. "You scream, I tell Dad you've been messing around with Mike at the grocery store. You know what he'll do." And I did know. I had seen the rage, seen what my father did to my mom, just for smiling at the guy who filled our propane tank. She couldn't lift her arm for a week after that. I knew exactly what he'd do to me if he believed I'd been offering myself, his words, for the neighborhood boys. So I didn't scream. I bit the pillow and stayed silent, while Chuck did things I still struggled to describe out loud. It hurt. God, it hurt so much, I thought it would split me open. But that pain, the physical tearing, was nothing compared to what it did to my soul. To carry something like that, to know it was happening, and no one, not a soul, was going to save me. That kind of truth crushes you from the inside out. The morning after, I could barely stand upright. Every step felt like I was walking through glass. My mother noticed, of course she did. "Rosa, what's going on?" "Why are you limping?" I lied. Said I'd tripped on the porch steps. She didn't press. But later, when Chuck was out of sight, she gently cleaned my wounds, dabbing antiseptic on my skin with shaking hands. Her eyes stayed locked on the floor, silent tears falling. Not a word passed between us. Not then, not ever. From that moment forward, it became a pattern. 2, sometimes 3 nights a week. More when he felt like it. He'd wait until the lights were out and the house had gone still. Then he'd come. I trained myself to disappear. It's amazing what the mind can do when the body's being destroyed. I'd imagine myself as a bird soaring high above the trees, free and untouched, miles away from that suffocating bed and the weight pressing down on me. To my father, Chuck could do no wrong. He was the golden boy. They'd hit the local dive bar together, come home loud and staggering, laughing like old war buddies. "That's my son," my dad would holler to whoever was in earshot. Now that's a real man, not like that dull girl Rosa. Meanwhile, I was wasting away. Food lost its taste. Words left my mouth less and less. At school, the teacher started asking questions. "Is everything okay at home, sweetheart?" I'd nod, say yes. What else could I do? Who'd believe me anyway? Chuck was everyone's favorite, charming, respectful, always the first to help carry groceries or toss a ball with the neighborhood kids. No one could picture the beast he became once the door shut behind him. There was one time I almost said it, almost let it all out. It was to Mrs. Henryson, the woman next door. She was different from the other ladies. lived alone, worked full-time, no man in sight. The church women whispered about her, called her unnatural, said she didn't know her place. But she always treated me with warmth. "Rosa, honey, you're not okay," she said one Sunday afternoon, catching me sobbing behind the church steps. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth. The words were trembling there. My brother, he... But then I pictured my father. What he'd do. Not just to me, but to anyone who stood in the way. My mother, Mrs. Henryson, anyone, and I froze. "It's nothing," I said. "Just had a fight with a friend." She didn't believe me. I saw it in her eyes. But she let it go. Years later, when it was all out in the open, she found me. I knew Rosa. I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing. I'm so sorry. Of course I forgave her. What else could she have done? Back then, no one talked about these things. Families kept their shame sealed tight behind locked doors. We called it privacy. We called it loyalty. It was silence, really, just silence. By the time I turned 13, my body was betraying me again. Curves forming skin, changing my first period, arriving like a curse I hadn't been warned about. My mother handed me a stack of old cloths and whispered, "You're a woman now. Be careful, careful," as if I hadn't already been living in constant caution, tiptoeing through a house built like a trap. But with the shift in my body, Chuck grew worse. It was like I'd transformed into a prize, something rare and exclusively his. The nightly visits grew more frequent. Sometimes he didn't even wait for darkness. He'd press me against the hallway wall, slip into the pantry behind me, stalk me like prey through our own home. "You're turning into something else," he'd say, eyes dark. "Soon the boys'll come sniffing around, but you're mine, remember that, mine." Like I was some possession with his name carved into my skin. And the worst part, everyone acted like that was normal. My father would say, "Chuck'll pick your husband one day. He knows the boys in this town, knows who's worth a damn." Husband. What a cruel joke. The only man who had ever laid a hand on me was the one who shared his blood. And then came the day that broke everything wide open. It was December, the air so thick and hot, it felt like the world was suffocating. Dad was at work. Mom had gone down to the creek to wash clothes. I was alone. But not really. He was still there. "Come here, Rosa," he called, voice low. "Let's enjoy this little bit of quiet." I ran. For the first time, I ran. But he was faster. He grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanked me back toward the bedroom. But this time, God help me, this time I fought. For the first time in all those years, I didn't just endure. I resisted. I clawed, bit-kicked with everything I had. But he was stronger. He'd always been stronger. "You think you're tough now," he sneered. "Guess it's time you learned who's in charge." And the lesson he delivered that day hurt more than every other night, combined a kind of hurt that cut through flesh and bone and spirit. When he was done, I was bleeding badly. He stared at the blood staining the sheets, then scoffed, "Better clean that up before Mom gets home." But I didn't. I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. I just lay there, soaking in that dark, warm pool, begging whatever God might exist to end it. Let me vanish. Let me dissolve into the mattress and be gone. That's how my mother found me. Her scream still rings in my ears, sharp and guttural, a sound born from horror, heartbreak, and unbearable guilt. She knew. Of course she did. She had always known. "Oh my God, baby. My God." She gathered me in her arms, rocked me back and forth like she used to when I was little, whispering, "Forgive me, sweet girl. Forgive your mama." Maybe something inside her broke that day, or maybe for the first time something finally clicked into place. I'll never really know, but I do remember how she picked me up, bathed me with trembling hands, gently washing the blood and pain from my skin like she was trying to take it all away. Then she wrapped a few clothes in a sheet, grabbed my arm, and said, "We're leaving." I asked, "Where are we going, Mama?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know, baby. But anywhere's better than here." We almost made it. We were at the front door, bags in hand, when my father came home drunk as usual. He looked at us, at the suitcases, at the scene, my mother's swollen face, my bruises, the bloodied linens. And he knew. He didn't need a single word to understand. "What kind of bullshit is this?" he barked. My mother tried to speak, voice trembling, eyes swollen with tears. She pointed to the blood, the marks, pleaded with him to see what had happened. Chuck showed up right then, standing smug behind Dad, like a soldier waiting for orders. My father turned cold-eyed. "Is this true, son?" Chuck just shrugged. "Rose is lying, Dad. You know how girls are probably jealous I got a girlfriend now." And my father believed him, or pretended to, or simply didn't give a damn. His answer was to slap my mother so hard she hit the floor. "Stop defending that whore," he shouted. "You want to run, fine, but she stays. Someone's got to cook and clean around here." My mother looked at me, and I saw it. I saw the precise instant her spirit gave out. She dropped the bag with a soft thud and turned around. Without a word, she walked back to the bedroom. We never spoke of that day again. Life continued. The nights didn't stop. My body kept being used. My soul kept breaking in pieces, too small to pick up. But something inside me shifted. I was no longer the terrified girl who bit the pillow to muffle screams. I had become something else, something harder, a survivor. And survivors, they do what they must to stay breathing, even if everything inside them has already gone quiet. That's how it is in a house where the monster wears a crown, where the queen's too broken to protect the princess, where cries dissolve into the wallpaper and tears leave no trace. That's how a girl learns that family can mean hell in a prettier frame. And the worst part hadn't even arrived yet. The year 1965 started like a warning. On New Year's Day, I woke up nauseous, an awful twisting sickness that pulled me straight to the bathroom. But this wasn't a hangover. We didn't celebrate anything in our house. Not holidays, not birthdays, not even survival. I figured it was just bad food. We didn't have much to eat, but even spoiled leftovers could do damage. That's what I told myself anyway. January slid by, and the nausea stuck around, especially in the mornings. My mother ever watchful, even when she tried not to be noticed. "You eat something rotten, girl," she asked one night while scrubbing the counter. I shook my head. We didn't have enough food for anything to spoil. We barely had enough to live. Then came February, and with it a terrifying realization. My period was late, way late. Not that I paid much attention to it before mine had never been regular anyway. But this was different. This time, my body wasn't just bleeding, it was speaking, and I was finally listening. But when I strung it all together, the missed periods, the constant queasiness, the aching chest, and that bizarre craving for peanut butter, slathered on pickles, my heart dropped straight through the floor. No, it couldn't be. But it was. I remember the crushing wave of desperation as I sat curled up on the cold tile of the bathroom floor, counting months on my fingers like they were sins. December hadn't come. January vanished. February was already slipping by. 3 months. 3 whole months I'd been carrying that nightmare inside me. The panic rose so fast, I barely made it to the toilet before I vomited again. But this time, it wasn't the pregnancy. It was pure suffocating fear. I was 14 years old, and pregnant, by my own brother. Who was I supposed to tell? How could I say it out loud? My mother already knew about what he did to me, and she had done nothing. My father, he'd never believe me. Worse, he'd twist it around, say I had tempted Chuck, just like he always said about women who asked for it. God only knew what he'd do once he found out. So I made a decision I would hide it. I had no other choice. I buried myself under layers of my father's oversized flannel shirts, my mother's shapeless dresses. I bound my belly with old rags until I could barely breathe, tightening them so hard my ribs ached. Anything to keep the truth from showing. But the body of a pregnant child isn't easy to disguise forever. It was my mother who saw it first, of course. One chilly March morning, she walked in while I was changing, and there it was, my rounded belly, exposed breasts, swollen, faint stretch marks creeping across my skin. Her face went pale as linen. "Rosa, baby, are you?" I broke down. For the first time in months, I didn't cry quietly into my pillow or silently into the night. I sobbed, heaving, ragged, gasping for air. I didn't want this, Mama. I swear I didn't. He just kept... She wrapped her arms around me, then tight, fierce, like she hadn't held me in years. And we cried together, two broken women, joined by one horrific truth neither of us had ever been able to stop. "We have to tell your father," she said eventually. My blood turned to ice. "No, Mama, please, he'll kill me." "What do you expect me to do, Rosa? We can't hide this much longer." And she was right. By 4 months, it was already too much to cover. 5 would be impossible. Still, I begged, "Just a little more time. Please, just wait." She nodded. Poor thing, she was terrified too. But from then on, she started tending to me in secret. She hid scraps of food for me, brewed herbal teas to ease the sickness, rubbed oil on my skin to soften the stretch marks. We didn't talk about what was happening. We couldn't, but in those quiet, stolen moments, she tried to be a mother again. Chuck. He kept coming. As insane as it sounds, he didn't notice. Men like him see what they want to see. He never realized my body was changing. Never noticed the way I flinched from pain instead of pleasure, though it had never been pleasure. Only agony, worse now with the baby growing inside me. April came, and with it, the unbearable Tennessee heat. I started wearing a shawl everywhere, even when the sun made the asphalt shimmer. I told folks at school I had a back problem, said the pain made me hunch over. The teachers nodded. Maybe they believed me. Maybe they just didn't want to get involved. At home, it was getting harder and harder to pretend. And then came that May evening, the night everything finally came undone. My father stumbled in, drunker than usual, reeking of cheap whiskey and rage. He cursed my mother over dinner being cold, shattered 2 plates, kicked our old hound across the room. Chuck tried to calm him, but not even the golden sun could stop the storm this time. "Where's that whore, Rosa?" he shouted loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I was hiding in the back room, curled up, clutching my shawl to my belly like it could shield me. I prayed, really prayed for him to forget I existed. But that night, God didn't answer. He kicked the door open, and there I was. He saw me crouched in the corner, trembling, trying to pull the shawl tighter as if that thin fabric could erase what had already happened. He stepped toward me, 1 foot, then another, and then he stopped. His eyes flicked from my face down to my stomach, then back up again once, twice. And I knew. "Take off that rag," he said. "Dad, I said take it off," he thundered. With shaking fingers, I let the shawl drop. I stood still, heart pounding against my ribs, my 5-month belly unmistakably outlined beneath the thin cotton of my dress. The silence that followed was worse than any blow. His face went red, then purple veins pulsing at his temples, his eyes bulging like they might pop from the pressure. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, seething. "Whose is it?" I tried to answer, but my throat tightened. No sound came out. "I asked you a question. Who did this to you?" He was demanding an answer I couldn't give, not without setting the whole house on fire. "Who's the father of that bastard child?" "Henry, please," my mother murmured, trying to calm him. He didn't even glance her way before backhanding her so hard she stumbled into the wall. "Shut your damn mouth." Then he turned back to me, rage spilling from every pore. "Whore, I always knew you were trouble. Who was it, that grocery boy, the butcher's helper? How many?" Each word cut deeper than the last. Slut, whore, disgrace. I was 14 pregnant by my own brother, and this was what my father saw when he looked at me. It wasn't like that, I didn't. "Don't call me Dad," he hissed. "I ain't the father of no whore." That's when Chuck appeared in the doorway, quiet at first. He took one look at the room, the scene. The horror my mother nursing her cheeked me, standing there exposed, and he understood everything instantly. But instead of guilt or fear, I saw something else on his face, fury. Not for what he had done, but for what he thought I might do next. "What the hell's going on?" he asked, voice calm, calculated. My father pointed straight at me like I was filth crawling across the carpet. "Your sister's pregnant. The little tramp's carrying some bastard." Chuck looked me in the eye. Just 1 second. He knew I was about to speak. He saw it, and he beat me to it. I figured he said, keeping his tone even. "I saw her hanging around with Mike from the gas station. Told you, but you wouldn't listen. Saw them more than once." Mike. A 16-year-old kid who barely even noticed me. But the name alone was enough to send my father into a drunken rage. "That son of a bitch, I'll kill him," he shouted, storming out the front door like a man on a mission. Chuck followed behind him, not to stop him, but to make sure the lie held. And there I was, left in the wreckage with my mother, who looked at me with a sorrow too deep for words. "Why didn't you tell the truth?" she whispered. "Would it have mattered?" I asked, too numb to even cry. "Do you really think he would have believed me?" She didn't reply. She didn't have to. We both knew the answer. What came next was worse than any nightmare. My father found Mike caused a public scene so vile the whole town heard about it. The boy's family tried to defend him, swore up and down he'd never touched me, and they were telling the truth. But it didn't matter. My father had already poisoned the well, told everyone that Mike had corrupted his innocent daughter. Within 2 weeks, Mike and his family packed up and left town, fled from the gossip, the threats, the shame. An innocent boy paid the price for my brother's sins. And me, I became the town's disgrace, the ruined girl, the stain on the Raffalo name. My father wouldn't even look at me anymore. My mother took care of me in secret, but with a heaviness in her eyes that told me she wished it had all been different. Chuck became the town's golden boy, the brother who had tried so nobly to warn his father of his sister's bad behavior. It was disgusting. He still came to my room some nights, though not as often. I was damaged goods now, as he put it. But when he did come, he'd lean in close and whisper, "That baby's mine. Don't you ever forget it." June crawled by. July was worse. My belly swelled. The baby kicked. And I felt myself wasting away. I stopped going to school. My father forbid it. "You're not embarrassing me in front of decent people," he said. So I stayed inside, locked up, a prisoner in a house that already felt like a prison now, with another prison growing inside me. The only time I left was for church. My father insisted on that, said I needed to show my face so people could see the shame I carried. The women at church whispered behind their hymnals, pointed when they thought I couldn't see, shook their heads with pity or disgust. I never could tell. I sat in the last pew, every Sunday shawl stretched over my enormous belly, and prayed not for forgiveness. What had I done that needed forgiving? No, I prayed for strength, for an escape, for something, anything that might save me. By August, I was 8 months along and barely able to move. My ankles were swollen. My back screamed with every step, and the baby inside me felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My mother, who had helped deliver babies in the neighborhood for years, knew it was getting close. She had been a midwife in her spare hours when she wasn't bent over buckets of laundry or nursing fresh bruises from my father's fists. She was the one who prepared me, told me what signs to watch for, taught me how to breathe through the pain, how to ride the waves instead of fight them. "It's going to be rough, baby girl," she said, brushing my hair out of my face. "You're still young and so small, but we'll get through it." As if she could carry the agony with me, as if she could split the weight of birthing a child who was also her grandson. But she said we like she believed it, and maybe she did. It started at dawn, early September, while the sky was still a faded shade of night. A sharp ache in my lower back woke me, followed by a tightening in my belly and the warm rush of fluid down my thighs. My water had broken. I called out to my mother in a whisper. She came fast, eyes sharp, hands already working. It's time. The hours after that melted into a blur of agony. I bit into a dish towel just to keep from screaming, from waking the men who slept feet away. My mother boiled water, laid out clean towels, whispered strength into my ears. "That's it, honey, breathe. Just like that. We're almost there." But it wasn't almost there. The baby was breech stubborn, refused to turn. My mother, slick with sweat, used every trick she knew to coax him into position. "Holy Mary, help my child," she whispered between each effort. 16 hours, 16 gut-wrenching, bone-shattering hours that stretched like eternity. By the time he was ready to come, I had nothing left. Not breath, not muscle, just pain. "One more time, Rosa," she pleaded. "Push, just one more." And through a scream that tore me in half, he was born. A boy, small but whole, with soft dark hair, skin like cream, and when he opened his eyes, green like Chuck's. My mother clipped the cord, wiped him down, wrapped him in a flannel swaddle. Then she laid him gently on my chest, and something inside me cracked open. Love, fierce, blinding, unstoppable. Not the kind that grows, it struck like lightning. That tiny life, born of such horror, had done nothing wrong. He was clean, pure, deserving of every ounce of protection I could give. "What will you name him?" my mother asked softly. Before I could speak, the bedroom door creaked open. My father stepped inside, Chuck just behind him. They took one look at the child, still nestled against my body, and at me, blood-stained, barely breathing. "It's a boy," my father grunted. For a split second, a flicker of pride passed across his face, like a shadow too faint to trust. Then it was gone. Doesn't matter. A whore's kid is still a whore's kid. Chuck moved forward. He stared at the baby, saw the green eyes, the chin already forming the square shape of his own, and then he smiled. "He's handsome," he said, like he was admiring a trophy. And for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something, remorse maybe, regret. But no, it wasn't that. It was possession. That child to him was proof. Proof that I was his, that he could do what he wanted and leave his mark. He'll be called Charles, my father declared. Charles. A good, strong name. Maybe he won't turn out like his mother. And just like that, my son had a name, Charles Rafflo. No father listed on any record. No mention of Chuck. Mike had disappeared from town months ago. So legally, there was no man to claim him. It was just me, my name alone. The days that followed were surreal. My father acted like the baby didn't exist. My mother did what she could, cooked, cleaned, helped me heal, but the house felt haunted. And Chuck, he hovered, watched when I nursed Charles, when I changed his diaper, when I rocked him to sleep. Sometimes he'd reach for the baby. I'd flinch, pull away. He's mine too, he whispered once when we were alone. No, I said, my voice steady for the first time. He's mine, only mine. But I knew the truth. In that house, in that twisted family, nothing ever really belonged to me. Not my body, not my child, not even my thoughts. The milk came slow. Charles cried from hunger. I cried from exhaustion. My mother brewed teas, massaged my back, whispered encouragement. But it was like my body couldn't give. Like it knew this baby had been forged in suffering, and it just shut down. And then Mrs. Henryson, God bless her, stepped in. The same neighbor who once saw through my lies. The only person outside our walls who had ever truly looked at me. And she saved us. She showed up with a can of baby formula, claiming it was left over from her grandkids. A lie, of course. She'd bought it herself. But she offered it in a way that left my father with no excuse to refuse, without making himself look even more heartless than he already was. Take it, Henry, she said firmly. It's for the baby. He didn't ask for any of this. And so Charles survived those early months, fed by the kindness of a woman who owed us nothing, dressed in clothes that appeared anonymously on the porch. A blanket one day, a pacifier the next. The town knew, everyone knew, and a few, just a few, did what they could in quiet defiance of the shame. But inside that house, things kept crumbling. My father drank more, yelled louder, struck harder. My mother seemed to wilt like a flower left in drought. And Chuck, he started making plans. When he's older, he'll be just like me, he'd say, rubbing his chin. I'll show him everything. He'll be my right hand, my blood. The terror those words stirred in me was worse than any bruise. My son, my baby. He wanted to mold him into something dark and violent, another him. No, absolutely not. I would die before letting that happen. That's when I started planning our escape. I was 15, just a girl with a baby barely out of swaddling, no money, no family beyond the walls of that prison, no real idea where to go. But I had to try for Charles, for that sweet child who deserved to grow up unchained by the past, who deserved a chance to be more, to be whole, to be free. But how do you flee a cage when your jailers sleep in the next room? How do you protect a baby when you're still a baby yourself? How do you claw your way to salvation when the whole world has turned its back on you? The answer would come unexpected and wild, and it would change everything. But that part of the story's for later. The idea of running beat in my mind like a second heartbeat, day after day. Charles was 3 months old, taking well to the bottle, sleeping most nights. But how does a girl with nothing, not even a suitcase, run away with a newborn? Where do you go? How do you even begin? It was December when I finally gathered the nerve for my first try. My father was supposedly at work. Chuck had gone off to the rec center to shoot hoops. My mother was hanging laundry in the backyard. I wrapped Charles in the softest blanket we had stuffed a grocery sack with a few baby clothes and a half-used can of formula. That was all I had. I didn't even have shoes for him. We would leave like ghosts. I made it to the gate. My heart thudded so loud, it drowned out the world. 1 step, 2, 3 onto the sidewalk, and then I heard his voice. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" I froze. He hadn't gone to work. He'd been hiding, waiting like he'd known this day would come. I turned slowly, holding Charles tight against my chest. I was just taking him out for some air. The slap hit me mid-sentence, sent me sprawling onto the sidewalk. I curled around Charles, shielding him with my body. He wailed in fright. My father's spit flew as he screamed, "You think you're gonna run off with that bastard? Huh, you lying whore?" He yanked me up by the hair, dragged me back inside, locked the door behind us, and pocketed the key. From that day forward, I was a prisoner in every way. I couldn't step outside without someone watching me. January 1966 arrived hot and suffocating, like the air itself was punishing us. Charles grew fast. His eyes stayed that same piercing green. His jawline started to resemble Chuck's more and more. He was my miracle and my curse. I loved him fiercely, but every inch of him reminded me of the horror I had survived. Chuck began hovering more, asking to hold him to play. I wanted to vomit at the sight, but sometimes I couldn't stop him. My father encouraged it. Let his uncle be around him. Boy needs a man in his life. A man, if only he knew what kind of man Chuck really was. One afternoon, I overheard Chuck laughing with a friend. "When that kid grows up, he'll be my wingman. I'll teach him everything booze girls how to have a good time. He'll be a man, not some mama's boy." I felt something in me snap. He didn't mean baseball. He didn't mean fishing. He meant control, domination. He meant turning Charles into another monster. No, I would die before I let that happen. I would kill if I had to. I tried again one night in February. This time I planned better. Waited for the house to go silent. Waited until their snores were deep and even. I grabbed the kitchen knife, crept to the bedroom window, jimmied it open inch by inch so it wouldn't creak. I passed Charles through first, then squeezed myself after him, knees shaking. I was almost to the road when the neighbor's dog started barking like mad. Porch lights blinked on. Windows creaked. I heard voices. My father flung open the front door, still in his undershirt and slippers. "Get her," he roared into the night. I ran. Barefoot, holding Charles against my chest, heart pounding like a war drum, I ran like the devil himself was on my heels. But where could I go? I had no one, no relatives, no friends beyond the shadows of that cursed house. Every street looked the same, in the dark, cold, empty, unfamiliar. Charles cried in my arms, his tiny voice full of need, and I cried too, my tears hot, and useless fear wrapping tight around my ribs. I ended up crouched behind the church, knees scraped, clutching Charles close, as I prayed not for forgiveness, but for dawn, for a way out, for something holy to intervene. But no miracle came. My father did, along with Chuck and 2 of their drinking buddies. It didn't take long to find me. Small towns like ours didn't have places for girls like me to disappear. They dragged me back like a dog in the dirt. The beating they gave me that night nearly killed me. I don't remember blacking out, just waking up 2 days later so swollen I couldn't open one eye, every inch of my body screaming. "Next time I'll kill you," my father hissed. And that little bastard too. I believed him. He meant it. That kind of hate is sharp. You can feel it in the air when it walks into a room. If I tried again, I'd end up in a grave, if I was lucky. March came and went, April drifted by. I lived like a shadow in that house, quiet, obedient, invisible, unless I made a mistake. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared for Charles. And when I failed at any of it, I paid with bruises. Chuck still came to me when he pleased less, now maybe because I was ruined in his eyes. But he still whispered, "You're mine, Rosa, always mine. Doesn't matter how many kids you have, plural." That word echoed like a death sentence. The terror of being pregnant again never left me. But what could I do? Locking the door didn't matter, he'd break it. Screaming only made the beatings worse. And fighting, he was stronger, always stronger. Then came May. That's when I met Rosie. She was my age, new in town, fresh out of New York and full of fire. Her dad was some big-shot bank manager, nothing like the folks around here. Rosie wore jeans to church. She swore when no one was listening. She smoked in secret and looked people straight in the eye when she talked. At first she scared me. Then she fascinated me. She was everything I dreamed of being: unapologetic, bold, free. We started talking after Mass slow, at first polite, then longer, deeper. She didn't flinch when she saw me, didn't whisper like the other girls. "How old's your baby?" she asked one Sunday. 8 months. "And the dad?" "There is no dad." She gave me that look, soft knowing. A woman's look. "There's always a dad," she said. "The question is whether he's worth speaking of." I didn't say a word, but I think she understood anyway. Soon she began coming by the house. Excuses, mostly borrowing a cookbook, asking for my mom's biscuit recipe. My father didn't like her. "That girl's trouble," he muttered. But my mother defended the visits. "It's good she has company," she said. What no one knew was Rosie was doing more than visiting. She was helping me plan. She had connections back in New York, women's shelters, safe houses for girls like me, places where no one asked questions. "But you'll need money," she warned. "Enough for a bus ticket and to get you on your feet. Money." That cursed word again. Where was I going to find money in a house where I couldn't leave, where even my breath was rationed? The answer came in the most unexpected form. June rolled in with preparations for the 4th of July. The town was painting signs, lining up floats, planning the parade and barbecue. My father insisted we show up, had to keep up appearances as always. He made me wear a blue gingham dress, tied a ribbon in my hair, like I was still 10. Charles wore a little stars and stripes onesie. Picture perfect. At the celebration, while my father got drunk with the other old men and Chuck flirted with every girl in a sundress, I slipped away, found a bench at the edge of the park, and rocked Charles, who was squirmy from the heat and the noise. That's when she came, Mrs. Laura Wilson, the mayor's wife, regal, kind, childless. Everyone knew she longed for a baby. Her sorrow followed her like perfume. "May I hold him?" she asked, eyes never leaving Charles. I nodded. She took him so gently, so full of wonder. Charles settled instantly, even smiled. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "So beautiful." We sat in silence, her swaying him back and forth, me staring at the sky. Then quietly she said, "It must be hard. So young, so alone." "It is," I said. I didn't have the energy to lie anymore. "If you ever need help, anything," I looked at her, really looked. And what I saw wasn't pity. It was something else, real kindness. Not the performative charity of church ladies who talked behind your back 5 minutes after hugging you. "Are you serious?" I am. Very serious. That's how it began. Mrs. Wilson started helping in secret. She sent baby clothes formula small amounts of money, always through someone else. My father thought it came from the church. He never questioned it. I began stashing the cash inside the mattress, lining beneath Charles's diapers, hidden in coffee tins. My escape fund, dollar by dollar. July flew by. Charles was crawling now, saying his first words, "Mama." I cried when I heard it, real shaking tears, because for the first time I felt it. I wasn't just a girl who gave birth. I was a mother. Then came August, another failed escape. This time I didn't even make it to the door. Chuck caught me packing a bag late one night. "Going somewhere, sis?" he asked, his voice like a slow-spreading poison. "Charles has a fever," I lied, reaching for a blanket. "I was going to take him to the clinic." "Liar," he said, stepping closer, trapping me between the wall and his shadow. "You know what happens to liars." His hand closed around my neck, not hard enough to choke, just enough to remind me he could, anytime he wanted. "If you ever try to run again," Chuck whispered, his breath hot and sour against my skin, "it won't be Dad who kills you. It'll be me, and that little bastard." He smirked. "Well, we can always make another one, right?" That broke me, not the threat to my own life. I'd long since made peace with pain, but the threat to Charles. That was a line I couldn't cross. I put the bag away, tore up the scraps of my escape plan, buried it all for now. For his safety, for his life. September came with thick air and falling leaves and Charles's first birthday. I scraped together a simple cake from the last of the flour and sugar. We sang happy birthday in hushed voices. My father didn't like noise, especially when it wasn't about him. Charles clapped his hands, smashed frosting across his cheeks, laughed like he didn't know what kind of world he'd been born into. For a moment, a precious fleeting moment, it was just me and my boy, a mother and her son. And then it all fell back into place. That night, Chuck stumbled into my room, drunk off cheap whiskey and whatever poison was rotting his soul. A whole year, he said, eyes drifting toward Charles asleep in his crib. A year since my boy was born. "He's not your son," I said quietly, but he laughed, an ugly, empty sound with no humor in it. "Oh, come on, look at him. The eyes, the jaw. He's mine, Jess. Get out." "My room, sweetheart," he said, spreading his arms. "Ain't nothing in here yours. Not the air, not the light. Not even you. You're mine. You forgot." He grabbed me. I fought back, but he was too strong, too drunk, too dangerous. Charles woke with a cry, his tiny body trembling. "Shut him up," Chuck snapped. I broke free, rushed to the crib, pulled Charles into my arms. I rocked him, whispered to him, prayed he wouldn't feel the fear vibrating through me. Behind me, I heard Chuck move closer. "Beautiful, ain't it?" he muttered. Mother and son. My family. I gritted my teeth, bile rising in my throat. I clutched Charles tighter, shielding him with my body like I could form a wall of flesh and bone. One day Chuck slurred, "I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna tell him I'm his real daddy. And then the three of us will be a real family." That was it. The final crack. Right there, holding my son, listening to that monster breathe behind me, I made the decision. I was going to run. Even if it cost me my life, even if I had to crawl, I was getting Charles out of that nightmare. I didn't know when or how, but I would. What I didn't know was that the chance would come sooner than I thought, and in the most devastating way. October crept in with gray skies and strange quiet. My father, usually loud and violent, had gone still. He drank less, spoke even less. I thought maybe I was imagining it. But one afternoon while washing dishes, my mother said, "Henry's not right. He's tired. No appetite." She was right. The man who'd once stormed through rooms like a beast now looked faded. His skin had taken on a yellow hue. His eyes hollowed, his body thinner. But no one said anything. In our house, weakness was never acknowledged. It was dangerous. Then one morning it happened. I woke to the sound of screaming from my parents' room. I grabbed Charles and ran. My father was on the floor, body convulsing, froth bubbling at his mouth, limbs stiff like iron. My mother knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "Call someone," she screamed. Chuck appeared pale and shaken. For the first time, I saw fear on his face, real human fear. He bolted to fetch Mr. Thompson, the pharmacist, the closest thing to a doctor we had. But it was too late. By the time Mr. Thompson arrived with his leather bag of remedies, the foaming had stopped. So had the shaking. So had the breathing. The man who had ruled over our lives like a tyrant was lying in pajamas and slippers, dead on the bedroom floor. Massive heart attack, the pharmacist muttered. Nothing anyone could have done. And just like that, my father, Henry Rafflo, was gone. The man who'd called me a slut, a whore, who let his son destroy me night after night, who used fear as his favorite form of love, dead. I thought I'd feel something, grief maybe, or relief, but all I felt was nothing. A void, like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but now I didn't know how to walk without it pressing down. It was strange how quickly the world moved on. His wake was held that same afternoon you don't wait in a hot southern town. The house filled with sweaty bodies, neighbors, and strangers. Uncles I didn't recognize, co-workers from the plant, drinking buddies from the bar. All of them parading through the door, mouths full of lies. He was strict but fair, they said. A good provider. Hard man, but honest. I stood there watching them speak like actors reading lines, and I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because in places like ours, lies are more comfortable than truth. Chuck stepped into his new role like he was born for it. The man of the house, the host, accepting condolences, giving orders, nodding like he carried the weight of the world. And on his face beneath the sorrow, I saw it pride. Pride that he had inherited not just the roof over our heads, but the power that came with it. The new king of the castle. That's what Chuck became. The new ruler, the one holding the leash. And it hit me, not in the church, not during the service, but out there in the dirt as they lowered my father's casket into the ground. That was the moment I realized his death wasn't just an ending. It was the first real chance I'd ever had. The man who caged me, who said he'd kill me if I ever ran, was finally gone. I looked across the grave. Chuck stood beside my mother, playing the role of the grieving son, all crocodile tears and protective arms. But when our eyes met, he smiled, just a flicker of the mouth. Subtle a smile, meant only for me. That smile said everything. I'm the boss now, and you're even more mine. But what he didn't know, what he could never imagine, was that in that exact moment, as dirt thudded down on that coffin, I wasn't mourning. I was planning. I was counting the steps between that grave and my freedom, mine and Charles's. My father's death wasn't a tragedy. It was the miracle I had begged for night after night through clenched teeth and whispered prayers. The days after the funeral were a haze of casseroles and condolences. Neighbors came and went, dropping off meals, saying all the right things with all the wrong smiles. My mother wandered the house like a ghost without chains. For the first time in her life, she had no one barking orders at her, and she didn't know who she was without him. Chuck strutted through the house like he'd always owned it, greeting guests, handling the estate paperwork, signing forms with his father's heavy hand. But I was already moving in silence. While they played their parts in the theater of mourning, I was plotting escape. Rosie came by on the third day, storming into the house with that signature defiance, like she didn't give a damn what anyone thought. So she asked, "You gonna take the shot?" I looked down at Charles toddling across the floor, saying half-formed words, his little legs wobbling beneath him. 14 months old, full of light. My baby boy, born of darkness, but deserving the sun. "Yeah," I said, "but I've got to be smart. When soon? Before Chuck locks the whole house down for good." The plan was simple in theory. wait for the will to be read, claim my rightful share because legally I was his daughter, and daughters are entitled to something right, then disappear. Rosie already had a cousin in New York who rented rooms to girls like me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lifeline. It was hope. And then came the will. Turns out Henry Rafflo had prepared everything down to the last insult. The lawyer opened the envelope and read it out plain. Every cent, every acre, every key to the house went to my son, Anthony Rafflo. My mother and I were given the privilege to live there only so long as Chuck allowed it. "That's not right," my mother finally said, voice shaking but firm. "I'm his wife. She's his child." The lawyer barely blinked. "Tennessee law allows it, ma'am." He had full authority to leave his estate as he saw fit, and that's when Chuck smiled. Not smug, not evil, just calm, like everything was unfolding exactly as he planned. That night, lying on my mattress, with Charles curled beside me, reality hit like a cold wave. I had no money, no claim, no power, and the cost of getting to New York impossible. I needed a bus ticket, food for the trip, formula diapers. I needed a place to land. Then I remembered Mrs. Wilson, the mayor's wife, Grace in pearls and silk, the one who had rocked Charles like he was something precious. She had once said, "If you ever need help anything," was that offer still good? The next morning, I told my mother I needed to get medicine for Charles at the pharmacy. It wasn't true. But she didn't ask questions anymore. She was drifting lost in the silence, left behind by a man she no longer feared, but still obeyed. I walked to the mayor's house, heart in my throat. The place was enormous, immaculate hedges, white columns, gated like a fortress. I rang the bell and waited, praying she wouldn't pretend not to be home. Then she appeared, elegant as always, in a soft silk dress, her eyes calm and kind. "Rosa," she said, "what a surprise. I heard about your father. I'm sorry." "Thank you," I whispered. I need to talk to you." She looked at me, really looked, and saw it, the desperation, the ache. "Come in, sweetheart. Let's talk." Inside the living room shimmered with glass and light. Charles sat in my lap, wide-eyed at the crystal chandeliers. I told her everything. Not the horror, not the parts I still couldn't say aloud, but enough. That I needed to leave, that I had nowhere, that I feared what would happen if I stayed. She listened without interrupting, without blinking. When I finished, she leaned back and sighed. "I suspected," she said softly. "You live in a town like this long enough, you hear whispers. But I never had proof. I never knew how to help. You can..." "Now," I said, "please, I just need enough to get out. A ticket, somewhere to start." She went quiet. Time stretched out. Then finally she said, "I can do better than that." She leaned forward. "I have a friend in Washington, D.C., runs a family boarding house. She's looking for help in the kitchen room and board included. It's not glamorous, but it's safe. It's honest. It's far from here." Washington, D.C., the capital. A whole world away from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Far enough to vanish. Far enough to never hear Chuck's voice again. My heart surged with something I hadn't felt in years, hope. "Yes," I said, voice trembling. "I accept anything. I'll call her today." Mrs. Wilson nodded gently. "And the ticket," she added with a small smile. "Consider it a gift." Tears burned behind my eyes. Gratitude swelled in my chest, so strong it nearly knocked the air from my lungs. But she wasn't finished. "There's one condition, Rosa," she said, her voice suddenly steel beneath the silk. "You leave, and you don't come back. Don't write. Don't call. Don't send word. You disappear, for your safety. And mine. My husband can't know I helped you. Do you understand? I understand." Of course I did. The mayor's wife couldn't risk her name being attached to the fallen girl from the edge of town. Not when reputation meant everything, I promise. No one will ever know. And when I walked away from that grand white house with its polished floors and fragrant gardens, my feet felt lighter than they had in years. For the first time since I was a child, I felt the stirrings of freedom. A real plan, a real chance. I just had to move quickly before Chuck noticed the shift in me. The days that followed were quiet, calculated. I packed only what mattered: clothes for Charles, our documents, and the few bills I had stashed in diaper tins and behind cracked drywall. My entire life reduced to one worn duffel bag. Rosie helped however she could. She researched bus schedules, mapped the safest route out of Tennessee, even taught me how to use a payphone. Cities are different, she warned. You've got to be sharp. Don't trust too easy. The escape was set for November 3rd, 1966. The bus would leave at 4:00 a.m. eastbound. Mrs. Wilson sent the ticket money with Rosie, along with a folded letter of recommendation for her friend in D.C., a woman who ran a boarding house and needed help in the kitchen. Nothing fancy, but it came with a roof-warm food and the one thing I needed most: safety. The night before, I didn't sleep. I watched Charles as he dreamed, memorized the curve of his tiny nose, the curls at his temple, the way his little fingers curled into fists. My boy, my reason, the only light I had ever known. At 3 a.m, I rose. I dressed Charles slowly while he dozed, wrapped him tight in a blanket, slung the bag over my shoulder, and crossed myself in a whisper. The house was still silent. My mother snored softly behind her door. Chuck was gone Friday nights meant he was likely at the brothel or passed out in someone's truck bed. I crept through the living room, every creak in the floorboards, sounding like thunder in the quiet. Charles stirred in my arms, murmuring, and I hushed him, gently swaying as I walked. I was almost at the door when I heard it. Really leaving, I froze, turned slowly. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway wearing her old flannel nightgown, hair wild eyes red and wet. "Mom, I know," she whispered. "I've always known. Everything." Her voice cracked like a branch underfoot, but I didn't have the courage. "Your father." I was scared. "Why didn't you protect me?" The question left my mouth before I could catch it. Years of hurt in just 6 words. She looked down. "Because I was weak," she said. "Always have been. But you're not. You're strong, Rosa. So much stronger than I ever was." We stood in the dark, 2 women linked by blood and brokenness, one who had surrendered to fear, and one who was finally breaking free of it. "Go," she said at last. "Go and don't look back. Raise that boy. Give him the life you never had." I stepped forward, kissed her cheek. Her skin was warm with tears, her scent familiar lye soap and old sorrow. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, my daughter." I stepped out the door without turning back. The dawn was cold, sharp, honest. Charles nestled against me, dozing. I walked quickly through the sleeping town, my feet tracing a path out of hell. Each step carved distance between me and the life that had tried to smother me. The bus station was small, dimly lit, the kind of place most people forgot existed. Rosie was already there, leaning against the wall, loyal to the end. "I thought maybe you weren't coming," she said. I almost didn't. My voice cracked. "My mother. She knows. She always knew." Rosie gave a slow nod. Between women, some truths don't need saying. The bus hissed as it pulled up, clouds of smoke curling in the air. The driver, a tired old man with a belly like a barrel, took my ticket without meeting my eyes. "Washington." "Huh," he grunted. 18 hours if she don't break down." 18 hours. Almost a full day between me and everything I'd ever feared. The future was still a question mark, but I knew this much: anything waiting out there was better than what I'd left behind. I climbed the metal steps, juggling the weight of Charles and our bag. The bus was mostly empty, just a few travelers slumped against windows, rocking gently with the rhythm of the road. I found a seat near the back, pressed my forehead to the glass, and whispered to the night, "We're free." I picked a seat in the back by the window where I could see the world rushing away behind us. I settled Charles on my lap. He was awake now, his big green eyes wide with wonder, soaking in every sound and flicker of light like it was all brand new. Rosie climbed the steps to say goodbye. "Take care of him," she said, "and take care of yourself." "I will," I whispered. "When you get there," she added, "forget this place. Leave it behind. Start from nothing, like it's that easy." "It's not," she admitted, squeezing my hand, "but it's necessary. You deserve joy, Rosa. Both of you do." The driver gave a sharp honk. "Let's go, folks. I've got a timetable to keep." Rosie rushed back down the steps, turned and waved from the sidewalk as the engine roared. I waved back, throat-tight eyes stinging with tears I didn't dare let fall. The bus pulled away, picking up speed, cutting through the sleeping streets. I watched the small houses blur by the church where I once begged in silence, the cemetery where my father now lay rotting, the town square where I was never allowed to play. Oak Ridge dissolved behind us, swallowed by the dark. It became memory. It became past. Charles pointed out the window, his little fingers smudging the glass. "Look, Mama. Lights." "Yes, baby," I said, smiling through the ache. "We're going far, far away." He clapped, delighted. The world was an adventure to him, bright and new. He had no idea what we were escaping, no idea what waited in that house for the woman and child who didn't wake up there. I pictured Chuck discovering the empty bed, the rage, the betrayal, but underneath it all, relief. He wouldn't have to share the inheritance anymore, wouldn't have to look at the living proof of his guilt. Yes, he'd be furious. But men like him always find someone else, some other girl without defenses, some other house without locks. Towns like Oak Ridge are full of them fathers who look the other way, mothers too tired to fight. But I wasn't one of them anymore. The road stretched ahead like a black ribbon, slicing through fields, bending toward the horizon. The sky slowly bloomed pink and gold as morning edged in. Charles was asleep now, curled in my lap, one chubby fist gripping my blouse. 18 hours. Just 18 hours to leave Rosa Raffalo behind and become someone new, someone untethered, someone brave, someone free. I leaned my head against the cool window and watched the south slip by. Patches of farmland, tired towns, blinking gas stations, like distant beacons in the early light. In Washington, no one would know me. No one would ask. I could be anyone, a young widow from Georgia, a small-town girl chasing work, a single mom looking for a second chance. Anything but the truth. The truth would stay buried in Oak Ridge with my father, with my innocence, with the girl I used to be and could never be again. Charles stirred and whimpered. I adjusted him and offered my breast. I was still nursing, not so much because he needed it, but because I did. He latched on calm, his green eyes looking up at me with total trust. Eyes just like his father's, but it didn't matter anymore. They were just eyes now. Beautiful eyes on a child who would never know where he came from, who would grow up clean, untouched, free. The bus rocked forward, tires humming against asphalt. Hours passed in fragments. The bus made brief stops in towns I couldn't name. People got on and off, strangers passing through each other's lives for a breath of time. At one dusty station, I stepped off to use the restroom. A gray-haired woman offered to hold Charles. "Thanks, but I'll take him with me," I said gently. Never again. Never again would I hand him over to someone I didn't know. I'd learned the hard way monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they sit at your table. Back on board, I unwrapped the small lunch. Rosie had packed half a sandwich, a banana, a plastic bottle of water. Simple, but it tasted like freedom. The afternoon slipped into dusk. Night fell soft and slow. Charles slept through most of the ride, waking only when the bus jerked or when he needed to nurse. I didn't sleep at all. Couldn't. Every passing town was another ghost behind me. Every mile was a triumph. It was close to midnight when the driver's gravelly voice came over the intercom. Next stop, Washington, D.C. Union Station. Folks getting off, get your things ready. Washington. We were here. I looked out the window and saw it, the city aglow, blocks of glass and steel, bathed in streetlight. Broad avenues stretched out like promises. And for the first time in my life, I felt it. Not fear, not grief, but something close to joy. We had made it. We were free. It was a world unlike anything I had ever known. Skyscrapers in the distance, taxis honking a sky that somehow looked bigger, busier. I took a deep breath, let the city air fill my lungs. This was it, the new life Rosie had told me to embrace without looking back. The new life my mother had never been brave enough to chase. Just me and Charles, now two survivors against the world. The bus hissed to a stop. My legs were stiff wobbly from the long journey, and my back ached, but I stepped off that Greyhound like I was shedding my old skin. Charles stirred, blinking at the flood of light, the noise, the chaos. "It's all right, baby," I whispered. We made it. Union Station was a cathedral of motion compared to sleepy Oak Ridge. Voices echoed from every direction. Travelers crisscrossed the marble floor. Buses rumbled in and out like mechanical beasts. Vendors barked their prices, music blared from a distant radio. I felt small, overwhelmed, but also invisible, and that was exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to vanish into this city's endless tide of strangers. I found a public phone and dialed the number Mrs. Wilson had scribbled for me. The receiver crackled, then a woman's voice answered, "Good Hope Boarding House. Hi, is this Mrs. Martha? Mrs. Wilson sent me. My name's Rosa Rafflo. Yes, dear. I've been expecting you," the woman said kindly. "Take a taxi. Give the driver this address." A taxi. I'd never taken one in my life, but Washington didn't wait for you to be ready. It forced you to learn fast. The driver was a kind-faced man in his 50s who helped me with the bag. "First time in the city?" he asked as we pulled into traffic. "Yes, you'll like it. DC's a good place if you're looking for a new start." A new start. That was all I needed. The boarding house stood on a quiet residential street, white brick worn steps, a modest front porch with potted plants and wind chimes. Not fancy, but clean. Safe. Home. Mrs. Martha stood at the door, apron dusted with flour, hair pulled into a neat bun, her voice warm as soup. "You must be tired," she said, opening the door. "Come in. I've got your room ready." The room was small but perfect. A twin bed with crisp sheets, a second-hand crib for Charles, a little dresser, a mirror above the washstand. It was more than I'd ever had. "The kitchen's downstairs," she added. "You start tomorrow?" "Yes, I can. I will." Good. 3 meals a day for the guests. Breakfast at 6 sharp, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. You'll get room and board pays weekly. Nothing glamorous, but it's steady. I nodded. It's more than enough. That first night, in a strange bed, with the soft hum of a new city outside my window, and Charles curled up in the crib beside me, I finally cried, not from fear, not from sorrow, but from something like hope. For all I'd survived, for all I had yet to survive, for the simple fact that we had made it. Outside Washington slept, a planned city, a capital of power and monuments, but to me, it was a blank page, and I was finally holding the pen. No one here knew the name, Rosa Rafflo, so I changed it. Rosa Smith, a name so common it could be anyone. I became a young widow whose husband died in a mill accident, one of the many faceless women who arrived daily carrying bags full of pain and dreams. And it wasn't even a lie, not really. I had left something behind. I was starting over. Oak Ridge and everything buried there. My father, my shame, that haunted girl I used to be, it all stayed behind. I was reborn here in this cramped little room, in this unknown city, with my son against my chest and freedom in my hands. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be ours, and that was everything. Washington became both my salvation and my test. The first months at Good Hope were hard, but not the kind of hard that bruises your skin. This was the kind of hard that leaves calluses on your hands and sweat in your hair. But it came with dignity. It came with peace. I'd rise at 5 each morning, kiss Charles's head while he slept, and tiptoe to the kitchen. Mrs. Martha would take care of him while I worked. Breakfast for 15 wasn't for the faint of heart. Toast by the stack, eggs sizzling on the griddle, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Then came the cleaning, prepping lunch, more cleaning, preparing dinner. Meatloaf, beans, boiled greens, sometimes just sandwiches. In between shifts, I'd run upstairs to nurse Charles, change him, sing to him. And still it was good. It was honest. No one touched me without permission. No one cornered me in the dark. No one called me names meant to hurt. I was just Rosa, the quiet girl in the apron, the cook, the hard-working mother with the big-eyed boy. Charles flourished. By the time he was 18 months old, he was racing through the halls like a little rocket, shouting new words and winning every heart in the place. Mrs. Martha doted on him. The housekeepers fought over who got to play with him. He was joy, he was light, and he was safe, and so was I. For the first time, my son had something that resembled a real family, unconventional, patched together with time and kindness, but still a family. The year 1967 rushed by like pages turning too fast. I saved every dollar I could, clinging to a quiet dream, to move out of the boarding house and rent a small place just for the two of us. Nothing fancy, just something that was ours. A corner of the world where Charles could grow without whispers, without pity, without questions. I didn't want to answer, but life has a way of shifting without warning. In 1968, everything changed again. He arrived on a gray Tuesday. Mr. Robert, a retired government worker in his early 60s, recently widowed, soft-spoken, and always dressed in neatly pressed slacks and button-ups. He stayed for a few weeks, vanished for a while, then came back. A rhythm that became familiar. He noticed Charles, which wasn't hard. At 2, my boy was talkative, curious, full of life, and those striking green eyes always drew attention. Mr. Roberts started bringing small gifts, a toy car one day, a picture book the next. I thanked him, polite but distant. I'd learned to be wary of kindness from men. Kindness had always come with a price, but Robert was different. He never crossed a line. He didn't hover or push. He just sat, told stories, made Charles laugh. Slowly my guard began to fall. He talked about his wife gone too soon from cancer and about the grown kids who lived on the other side of the country. He spoke with a soft ache in his voice. "You remind me of my daughter," he said once, while we peeled potatoes together. "Same fire, same fight in your eyes." One afternoon, Charles took a tumble on the porch, skinned his knee, and wailed like the sky was falling. Mr. Robert appeared out of nowhere with a weathered first aid kit. "I used to be a medic in the army," he explained, kneeling down. "I've got this." He hummed a silly tune while he cleaned the wound, dabbing carefully, talking the whole time to keep Charles calm. Something shifted in me as I watched, not fear, not suspicion. It was the realization that I was seeing a grandfather, a man who missed loving someone and maybe needed to be loved in return. Our friendship grew from there, slow and sturdy, like roots under the surface. He'd linger in the kitchen helping me shell peas or stir soup, telling me about the old days, Kennedy's speeches, marches in the South, the feeling that maybe this country could change. I listened and learned. I imagined the future. Then one day, he made an offer that stopped me in my tracks. "Rosa," he said one evening, setting his teacup down gently, "I have a townhouse in Georgetown. Been empty since my wife passed. Too big for me, really. How about you and Charles come live there? It's not charity. You take care of the house, cook like you do here, and I'll pay you fair. A house, a place of our own, away from the boarding house, away from the past. But what will people say?" He chuckled. "Let them talk. I'm too old to care about gossip. You need a home. I need company. It's business, not romance." I thought about it long and hard, talked it over with Mrs. Martha. "Robert's a good man," she said. "I've never seen him act out of turn. You'd be safe." And so in March of 1969, we moved. The house was modest, but warm. 3 bedrooms, a small yard out back, freshly painted shutters. For the first time in his life, Charles had his own room. I kept the place tidy, cooked meals, and made sure everything ran smooth. Mr. Robert would leave early and come home late, and we'd eat together, then retreat to our separate corners. There was space, respect, and silence, but the kind that felt peaceful, not cold. But children don't care for boundaries. To Charles, Mr. Robert became Grandpa Rob. He followed the old man like a shadow, asking for stories, showing him drawings, begging to be pulled along in his little red wagon. Mr. Robert, God bless him, melted completely. He taught Charles how to ride a bike on the cobblestone alley, took him to the park to feed the ducks, explained the different planes flying overhead, that big one, Charlie, that's a Boeing 707. Watching them together made my heart ache in the best way. This was what family should be. Love without condition, attention without expectation. All the things I had never been given, Charles now had, and I thanked the heavens every day for it. But time never stands still. In 1970, Mr. Robert's health began to fade. Heart trouble, the doctor said. Nothing too urgent at first, but enough to worry. I took over his meds, adjusted his meals, made him rest. He grumbled, called me bossy, and joked, "You're worse than my old sergeant. It's for your own good," I'd say. I know he'd sigh. That's why I listen. Then came a bad episode, chest pain, tightness, a trip to the hospital. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand as he caught his breath. "Rosa," he said suddenly, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard it. "I need to ask something. Don't talk like that. Listen, if something happens to me, I want you and Charles to keep the house. It's already done the papers, everything. I've got no one else. The kids don't call. You're my family now. Let me do this for you." I tried to refuse tears already spilling, but he reached for my hand again. "Let me take care of you the way you've taken care of me." And I cried not because of the house or the money or the gift, but because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw a person. Not a burden, not a mistake, someone worth protecting, someone worth loving. Mr. Robert recovered, but he was never quite the same. He moved slower, tired more easily, and I began sleeping in the room next to his, just in case he needed anything in the night. Charles floated between us, curled beside me, when thunder scared him, nestled in his own bed, when he wanted bedtime stories from Grandpa Rob. In 1971, I enrolled him in kindergarten, 5 years old, bright as morning, wearing his little blue uniform, with a backpack nearly bigger than he was. That gap-toothed grin lit up the sidewalk like a sunrise. My pride, my miracle. One afternoon out of nowhere, he looked up at me and asked Mom, "Why don't I have a dad?" The question hit like ice water. I'd known it would come, but when it did, I froze. "Your dad died when you were still a baby," I said softly. "How did he die?" "An accident. On the job. Was he nice?" I paused, took a long, slow breath. "Yes, sweetheart, he was. It was a lie. But some lies keep hearts beating. Some truths do nothing but break." He accepted it, at least for now. I knew one day I'd have to fill in the blanks, build a version of a man who never truly existed. Anything but the truth. 1972 came wrapped in red, white, and blue. Election fever swept the country, and Mr. Robert treated himself and us to a brand new color TV, the kind you'd only see in magazine ads. We watched the campaign coverage together, neighbors dropping by to crowd the small living room. When Nixon won re-election, Charles painted his cheeks with stripes and ran down the block waving a flag with the other kids, all laughter and joy. Watching him so normal, so safe, I thought of Oak Ridge. Did it still exist? Was Chuck still there? Was my mother still breathing, still pretending not to know? I pushed it down. That chapter was buried. I was Rosa Smith now, a cook, a single mother, a Washington woman. The past didn't touch me anymore. But some nights when the city slept and the street lamps cast long shadows through the curtains, it returned, in dreams, in flashes, Chuck finding us, Chuck taking Charles, and I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart racing, rushing to my boy's room just to make sure he was there. Safe, breathing, real. In 1973, Charles turned 7. Mr. Robert threw a party, balloons, chocolate cake, a dozen noisy kids from up and down the street. He gave me a camera for the occasion, and I captured it all. Frozen frames of a joy I never thought I'd know. That year, something unspoken shifted between me and Mr. Robert. It wasn't romance, we didn't need that. It was something sturdier, deeper, the kind of bond built in quiet rooms and morning coffee, in shared responsibilities and mutual trust. We became a family in the purest sense, chosen, not born. That winter, his health took a turn. His heart couldn't keep pace. One hospital visit turned into many. I split myself between caring for him and for Charles. Neighbors pitched in. Charles's teachers offered support. A net I'd never known wrapped around us, holding tight. One night in the hospital, as machines beeped softly and the air smelled like antiseptic and peppermint gum, Mr. Robert took my hand. His voice was weak but steady. "Rosa, you were the daughter I always hoped for. And Charles, he's the grandson I never got to meet." I squeezed his fingers. "Thank you." I whispered, tears spilling freely. "For everything." He passed that September, peacefully, in his sleep, just like he deserved. The funeral was simple. His sons arrived, two stiff men in dark suits, frowns pressed into their faces like creases ironed deep. Strangers. They asked who I was, questioned why I lived in his house, why I was mentioned in the will. "I was his housekeeper," I said plainly. "A housekeeper who inherits everything," one sneered. They didn't say the word, but I heard it in their tone. Gold digger, homewrecker, parasite. I let them talk. I didn't owe them anything. The lawyer handled it. Mr. Roberts' will was airtight. The house, as he'd promised, was legally mine and Charles's. The sons huffed and threatened lawsuits, but they never followed through. By the time winter came, they were gone for good. 1974 dawned differently. For the first time in my life, I had something solid under my feet. A deed with my name on it. A kitchen where no one barked orders. A front door I could lock behind me with certainty. Charles was thriving, healthy, curious, always with a book in hand or a question on his lips. I found work at a small diner down the street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I needed to earn our keep. But at night the silence was louder than I expected. Without Mr. Roberts' shuffling footsteps or his soft voice, the house echoed with emptiness. Charles missed him fiercely. So did I. That's when I met Mrs. Neely. She lived next door, tough as nails, originally from New Orleans. A woman of presence, sharp tongue, gold bangles, and rumors of being a voodoo priestess that no one dared question. She saw right through me. "Girl, you're carrying something heavy," she said one afternoon, leaning over the fence. "I see it in your eyes. You want to talk?" At first I didn't. Then one night, heavy with sleeplessness, I found myself knocking on Mrs. Neely's door. She welcomed me in, without questions, poured us coffee, thick as syrup, and we sat at her kitchen table beneath the soft flicker of a candle. I didn't tell her everything. I never told everything. But I spoke of the loneliness, the fear that curled around my chest in the dark, the nightmares that chased me through silence. She listened without interruption, only nodding now and then, her face steady with understanding. "Everybody's got ghost, child," she said. "The trick is not letting them drive." And that's how we became friends. She watched Charles when I had to work late shifts. I helped set up chairs and serve food at her gatherings, spiritual circles, prayer nights, community dinners that smelled of sage-fried okra and incense. It was the first time I truly felt part of something, belonging, a circle of people who looked out for each other, who didn't care where I came from or what my name used to be. Charles adored her. He'd sit cross-legged on her rug as she told stories, tales of saints and spirits, ancestral power and mythic strength. Through her, he learned about culture, about faith, about honoring difference. She opened his mind wide and filled it with respect and wonder. This boy, Mrs. Neely would say, her fingers brushing his cheek, he got light all his own. He's going places. And I prayed she was right. I prayed he'd go far, far from the shadow that brought him into this world, far from the name I never spoke, far from the nightmare that lived in his DNA. In 1975, Charles turned 9, bright, bold, full of questions. The father questions returned, this time deeper. What did he do? Mom, for work, construction, I said. He helped build this city. How come we don't have any pictures of him? We lost everything in a move. How'd you meet him? Every question pulled a lie from me. Each lie another stone in the wall I built to protect him from the truth. At night, once he was asleep, I began to write, pen to paper, memory to page. Not to publish, God, no, but to remember. To make sure I never forgot, even if I wanted to. Oak Ridge, Chuck, the cellar, the night we ran. I wrote it all in crooked, cramped letters inside a spiral notebook that I hid behind old sweaters in the back of the dresser drawer. Someday, I thought someone will find it. Maybe they'll understand, but not Charles. Never Charles. By 1976, he was stepping into adolescence for real, his voice cracking, acne blooming on his cheeks, his attention shifting toward girls with giggles and whispered notes. It was beautiful, ordinary, everything it was supposed to be. But those green eyes, those goddamn green eyes. The older he got, the more they mirrored Chuck's. In certain lighting from a certain angle, I'd see the man who'd tried to destroy me, and for a heartbeat, it would knock the air from my lungs. But I'd breathe deep and tell myself genetics isn't destiny. Love can rewrite the story written in blood. Charles was good, would be good, no matter where he came from. In 1977, he graduated from middle school. He wore a navy suit and a shy, proud smile, clutching his diploma like it was made of gold. I sat in the audience and wept silently, hiding behind sunglasses. My boy was becoming a man, a good man. I memorized every second, every smile, every step across that stage. By 1978, Charles was talking about college engineering, just like the father he believed in the ghost I'd carefully constructed. "I want to build things, Mom," he said, like Dad did. "You will," I told him. "You'll build everything he dreamed of, everything I dreamed of too." Those were long nights, his textbooks spread across the kitchen table, nerves thick in the air. Charles was tense and I was worse. When the acceptance letter arrived, Georgetown University Civil Engineering, it was like lightning struck joy right into our house. Neighbors came over with hugs and music. Mrs. Neely made her jambalaya with shrimp and sausage. We danced in the living room until our legs gave out. Charles wrapped me in his arms, laughing. "I made it. Mom, I really made it. We made it," I whispered. Against every odd, against every voice that ever said we wouldn't, we made it. College was a beast we weren't ready for. No one tells you about the cost, not just tuition, but books, bus fare, food. I went back to working 2 jobs. I served coffee and pie at the diner by day, scrubbed floors at an office building by night. It was brutal, but it was for him, for the future I'd prayed for him to have. In 1979, Charles was deep into his sophomore year, holding a steady GPA, working an internship, dating a girl from his class. Her name was Claudia. Bright, well-mannered, came from an old Washington family with a front porch and rules about dinner at 6. When he brought her home, his eyes sparkled. "Mom," he said, "this is Claudia. She's the woman I want to spend my life with." I smiled. He was only 19 and already certain young love, but the kind that's real deep, unwavering. 1980 became the year of caps and gowns. My son, the engineer. My chest ached with pride, tears stung behind my eyes. I watched him cross the stage in his navy gown, scanning the sea of faces until he found mine smiling like the sun. Later came the celebration. Claudia's family hosted. A doctor for a father, a teacher for a mother, siblings who were lawyers and scholars, polished people, kind people who looked me in the eye and shook my hand. Mrs. Smith. Claudia's mother said, "You raised a remarkable man." "He was born good," I replied. And maybe that was a lie. Or maybe it was the truth. Maybe it was both. Born of violence shaped by love. A miracle carved from silence, stitched together with patience and sleepless nights. A miracle I raised. Then came 1981, the wedding. A church filled with light, organ music swelling. Claudia in lace and ivory, Charles in a tailored suit, and me standing as maid of honor, the only family he had beside him. "Where are your relatives, Mrs. Smith?" someone asked. "I have none," I said gently. "They've all passed." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. As far as I was concerned, they were long gone. The priest spoke of covenant, of sacred love, of building a future on faith. I thought of Oak Ridge, of that twisted thing they once called a marriage, the trap they called holy. And then I looked at my son, choosing his bride, smiling at her with reverence and trust. This was love. This was heaven, not hell. 1982 arrived with a blessing. My first grandchild, a baby girl, Mary Claire. Tiny, loud, perfect. Charles walked on air, completely undone by fatherhood. Claudia glowed. And me, a grandmother at 51. I cradled her in my arms, traced every detail of her face. She was real. She was ours. No secrets, no shame, no fear. "Grandma, she looks just like you," someone said. I looked close. Dark hair, button nose, no green eyes, no ghosts. In 1984, another blessing, a boy, Henry Robert, named in honor of Mr. Robert, sweet-natured with a quiet smile. That year, Charles started building their forever home, brick by brick, a backyard for the kids' space for joy to grow. They had a life I'd only dreamed of, more than I ever thought I deserved. Sometimes during family dinners, I'd sit back and just watch. A table full of laughter, toddlers chasing one another, Claudia refilling glasses, Charles fixing a crooked chair. Everyday chaos, beautiful sacred chaos. No one knew, no one could ever imagine. And that was exactly how it needed to be. In 1985, Charles made another leap. He opened his own firm. Small but ambitious land development, municipal contracts, good work, meaningful work. People started to recognize his name. "Mom," he said one evening over coffee, "I want you to stop working. Let me take care of you now." I hesitated. Work had been my armor, my control, my safety net. But he insisted, and Claudia agreed. "You've done enough," she said. "You've earned rest." So I put away my apron, retired my mop and rags, became for the first time in my life just a grandmother. I picked up the kids from school, baked carrot cake with extra cinnamon, told bedtime stories, fairy tales with dragons and brave girls, and homes that never burned. No dark cellars, no narrow escapes, only magic. In 1986, we moved into a bigger house, 3 stories, wraparound porch garden, blooming with daisies and sunflowers, a pool in the backyard, a room for every child. Charles insisted I live with them. "You're the heart of this family, Mom," he said. "You belong with us." After a lifetime of drifting, of sleeping in borrowed spaces, I finally had a home. Not just a place, but a place that was mine. But the past, oh, the past, doesn't sleep easy. That same year, one night when sleep wouldn't come, I flicked on the TV. Late night news, the kind that jumps from one corner of the country to the next. And there it was, a segment. Town of Oak Ridge modernizes infrastructure. Oak Ridge. It was still there. The camera panned over familiar streets, now paved and freshly painted, new water systems, renovated public buildings. I leaned forward, heart pounding. Aerial views. Interviews with the mayor, with residents. I searched every frame for a familiar face. I found none. 20 years will change a place beyond recognition. I wondered, was he still there? Had he built a family? Had he found new victims to haunt new lives, to wreck like he wrecked mine? I reached for the remote and shut off the television. Some doors were never meant to be reopened. Some ghosts deserve to stay buried. And here I am now, 73 years old. Funny how time slips through your fingers when you're busy living instead of just surviving. Charles is a grandfather himself these days, silver in his hair, but the same gentle smile I've loved since he was a baby in my arms. Mary Claire, my first granddaughter, became a doctor, just like the grandfather she never got to meet but inherited in spirit. Henry Robert took after his father, became an engineer. And Alice, she's 16, sharp as a blade, dreams of writing books that change the world. Great-grandma, she asked me the other morning, have you ever thought about writing your memoirs? I nearly choked on my coffee. Memoirs, sweetheart. Oh, Grandma didn't live through anything interesting. Lie number 1,001. But some stories aren't meant to be told. Some are better left beneath the surface, sealed away, so the generations that follow can write their own stories, clean pages, no bloodstains, no shadows. Lately, I've been dreaming of Oak Ridge again, first time in decades. But this time it wasn't a nightmare. In the dream, the town burned. Fire took everything: houses, streets, memories. Smoke rose into a sky the color of forgiveness, and the wind carried it all away. I woke up lighter than I've felt in years. Even now, with gray in my hair and time lining my face, I've never truly left those years behind. The pain doesn't vanish. It settles deep down, like dust in the corners of your soul. But what I carry today isn't just sorrow. It's strength, it's survival, and above all, it's purpose. I thank my mother for finally standing up for me that night. It may have come late, and it may not have saved everything, but in that moment, she chose me, and for that I'm grateful. I'm not telling this story to ask for sympathy. I don't need pity. I need you to listen. Because this is a warning, a reminder, a call to action. To every parent watching, pay attention to your children, not just their grades or their chores, but their eyes, their silence, their sudden changes. Be their home, be their safety, be the person they can run to. And to those who've lived through what I did or are living it now, I see you, I believe you. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not to blame. There is a way out. There is help. There are people and organizations who care, who will fight for you when it feels like no one else will. Reach out. Scream if you have to. Call a hotline. Tell a friend. Walk into a police station. Just don't keep it locked inside. Because your voice, it matters. Your life, it matters. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own story or of someone you love, please leave a comment below. Let's make this more than just a video. Let's make it a space of truth, of healing, of power. Your words could be the light someone else needs tonight. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe, not for me, but for the thousands of voices that still haven't been heard. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's protect the next Rosa before it's too late. We are stronger than what happened to us. We are more than our scars. We are survivors, and survivors speak.